People gathered at the small airfield early that morning, drawn by curiosity more than respect. The wind carried dust across the ground as a rusty old plane was slowly pushed into the open space. Its metal body looked tired and forgotten, paint peeled away like old skin, wings bent slightly from years of neglect. Laughter spread through the group as whispers followed. Many could not believe someone had paid money for something that looked so close to the end. To them it was nothing more than scrap pretending to be a plane, and the idea that it could ever fly again felt like a joke they were happy to share. Mara stood a short distance away from them all, her posture calm, her face steady. She did not respond to the laughter or the comments thrown in her direction. Her eyes stayed fixed on the plane as if the noise around her did not exist. She saw beyond the rust and broken parts. She noticed the shape of the wings, the strength still hidden in the frame, and the quiet dignity of something that had once carried people safely through the sky. To her the plane was not broken, it was waiting. Some people shook their heads while others smiled in disbelief. A few spoke openly about how foolish the purchase was. They wondered if Mara knew anything about planes at all. They judged her by her simple clothes and quiet manner, assuming she had made a mistake she would soon regret. None of them asked why she had chosen this plane. None of them asked what it meant to her. They were too busy enjoying the feeling of being right. Mara remembered the day she first heard about the plane. It was in a small cafe near the edge of town. An old man had been speaking softly to the owner about the airfield and the past. His voice carried stories filled with wind and long flights over empty land. One name kept returning in his words: Tom, a pilot known for flying when others refused, a man who never turned away when help was needed, a man whose story ended suddenly without answers. That name stayed with Mara long after she left the cafe. She had searched for information quietly, visiting places people no longer cared about. She listened more than she spoke, and slowly the pieces came together. The plane she now stood before was the last one Tom ever flew, the one that vanished with him and later returned alone, damaged but standing. People moved on after that, but no one ever explained what truly happened. The story faded into silence, and so did Tom. As the crowd slowly lost interest and drifted away, one man remained near the old hangar, his shoulders bent by time, his hands trembling slightly as he held a faded cap close to his chest. His eyes never left the plane. They followed every movement, every sound of metal shifting. Mara noticed him and felt something tighten in her chest. She walked toward him slowly, careful not to disturb whatever memory held him there. The man looked up when he sensed her presence. His eyes were sharp despite his age, filled with surprise and a quiet fear. He studied her face as if trying to understand her intentions. Mara spoke gently, asking nothing at first, allowing silence to stretch between them. The wind moved around them, carrying the smell of fuel and dust. Finally the man took a breath that seemed heavier than it should have been. He told her he used to fly from this airfield long ago, back when it was full of life. His voice trembled as he spoke, not from weakness but from emotion held too long. He said that plane was not meant to end up like this. He said it carried more than cargo, more than people. It carried responsibility and courage. Mara listened without interrupting. She could feel the weight of his words even when he paused. The man did not say his name at first, but Mara already knew who he was. She could see it in the way he stood, in the way his eyes softened when he looked at the plane. This was Tom, not a legend, not a story, but a man who had been forgotten by the world around him, a man who carried years of silence alone. The realization struck Mara deeply. She understood now why she was meant to find this plane. Tom finally admitted that he never crashed, he never vanished. He landed far from help after saving others. He survived but returned to a world that had already moved on. The plane was blamed, the story was buried, and Tom chose silence over fighting a truth no one wanted to hear. His voice broke as he shared this, not from regret, but from exhaustion. Mara felt the laughter from earlier echo in her mind, and she knew those voices would soon fade, because this plane was not just metal and rust. It was proof, it was truth, and it was a voice for a man who had been quiet for too long. She placed her hand gently on the cold surface of the plane, feeling the history beneath her fingers. This was only the beginning, and soon the story carried by this old plane would silence every doubt that once surrounded it. The airfield felt different after Tom spoke. The silence no longer felt empty. It felt heavy with truth waiting to rise. Mara stood beside him without asking questions. She allowed his past to breathe freely in the open air. The old hangar creaked softly as the wind passed through. Tom kept his eyes on the plane as if it might disappear again. Years of quiet had trained him to expect disbelief. Yet Mara did not doubt him even for a moment. Tom slowly began to walk toward the plane. Each step carried hesitation mixed with longing. His hand reached out but stopped just before touching the metal. Memories rushed back stronger than he expected. He remembered the sound of the engine in strong wind. He remembered faces filled with fear trusting him completely. He remembered choosing danger so others could return home. Those memories never left him but were rarely shared. Now they stood awake between him and Mara. Mara asked him to tell everything from the beginning. Her voice was calm and patient. Tom took a deep breath before speaking again. He spoke of a night flight called for by desperation. A medical emergency far beyond safe roads. Weather warnings ignored because time mattered more. He described clouds like moving walls and heavy rain. The plane fought the wind as much as he did. Turning back was never an option for him. He told how the landing saved lives. How the ground was rough and unforgiving. How the plane took the damage meant for him. Afterward help came too late for recognition. The people he saved never knew his name. Reports were written without care for truth. Blame fell easily on the machine. Tom returned broken but alive. And silence felt easier than arguing with history. As Tom spoke, Mara noticed his shoulders relax. The weight he carried seemed to ease slightly. Words once trapped now moved freely. The airfield around them felt like a witness, listening without judgment or laughter. Mara understood the plane was never the problem. It was a shield that protected lives. It deserved respect, not mockery. And Tom deserved his story returned to him. Later that day, Mara brought tools and supplies. Not to repair immediately, but to honor the moment. She cleaned a small section of the plane carefully. Tom watched quietly standing nearby. Every sound of cloth against metal felt meaningful. People passing slowed down, noticing the change. Their expressions shifted from humor to curiosity. Something about the scene felt important, even if they could not explain why. News began to move quietly through the town. Not through headlines but through conversations. A woman restoring an old plane. An old pilot finally speaking again. Stories people thought were finished returning. Some listened with doubt while others with wonder. The laughter from before did not return. Instead, questions replaced it. Curiosity softened judgment little by little. Tom returned to the airfield each day after that. Sometimes he spoke and sometimes he stayed silent. Mara never pushed him beyond comfort. She allowed the story to unfold naturally. Trust grew between them through shared purpose. The plane became more than a project. It became a bridge between past and present, between truth and forgotten sacrifice, between one man and a world that moved on. As the sun set behind the hills one evening, Tom stood beside the plane once more. He rested his hand on the metal at last. Not with regret, but with gratitude. Mara stood beside him watching the sky change color. Neither spoke, but understanding filled the space. This was not the end of the story. It was only the moment before it rose again. And soon the truth would reach far beyond this airfield. Morning returned to the airfield with a quiet energy that felt new. Mara arrived early carrying tools and notes gathered from old records. The plane rested in the open light, as if ready to speak again. Tom followed later, moving slower, but standing taller than before. He watched Mara work with steady focus and growing trust. For the first time in years he felt useful rather than invisible. Mara had spent nights reading reports and forgotten logs. She discovered small details others ignored or dismissed. Dates that did not match stories that felt incomplete. Each piece pointed toward effort rather than failure. Tom listened as she explained what she found. His silence showed relief mixed with disbelief. People began stopping by the airfield more often. Not to laugh but to observe from a distance. They noticed the care given to every small task. They noticed Tom standing beside the plane each day. Some recognized him from old photographs posted nearby. Whispers changed tone, carrying respect instead of mockery. One afternoon, a local teacher brought a group of students. They asked questions with open curiosity and honest interest. Tom hesitated at first, but Mara encouraged him gently. He spoke slowly, choosing words with care. He shared lessons about responsibility and courage. The students listened with quiet attention and wide eyes. The plane slowly revealed its strength beneath the rust. Bolts tightened, panels aligned, and wings regained balance. Each repair felt like a promise rather than a risk. Tom guided Mara through checks he remembered well. Their teamwork felt natural, built on shared purpose. The airfield seemed alive again, responding to their effort. As days passed, old pilots reached out quietly. Some admitted they always doubted the official story. Others shared memories of Tom and his dedication. Their messages added weight to the growing truth. Mara gathered everything carefully without rushing. She knew timing mattered as much as evidence. Tom struggled at night with memories returning stronger. Dreams carried wind voices and long dark skies. Mara reminded him that the past no longer owned him. Each morning he returned steadier than before, speaking more freely, standing more confidently. Healing moved slowly, but it moved forward. The town council requested a meeting after hearing the stories. Mara attended with records and calm determination. Tom sat beside her, hands steady on his knees. Questions filled the room, but accusations did not. Respect replaced doubt as truth unfolded clearly. Silence followed, heavy with realization and regret. Outside the building, people waited, watching closely. When Tom stepped out, faces softened with understanding. No one laughed, no one spoke carelessly. The plane was no longer a joke or scrap. It had become a symbol of quiet bravery. And Tom was no longer forgotten or unseen. As the sun lowered behind the hills that evening, Mara and Tom returned to the airfield together. They stood beside the plane, listening to the wind. What once carried shame now carried pride. The story was rising beyond this place. And soon the sky itself would bear witness. The airfield changed completely as weeks passed. What was once quiet and forgotten now felt awake. People came not to mock but to learn and observe. The plane stood stronger with each careful repair. Mara worked with steady focus, never rushing a step. Tom guided her hands with memory and patience. Their bond grew without words through shared effort. The wind no longer felt lonely across the open land. News of the plane spread beyond the town slowly. Not through loud announcements but honest stories. Travelers stopped to see the aircraft with their own eyes. They listened to Tom speak with quiet respect. Many were surprised by the calm strength in his voice. He no longer hid behind silence or fear. The truth had given him something back. A place in the world that once forgot him. Mara organized a small gathering at the airfield. Not for praise but for remembrance and learning. Old pilots, mechanics, and families attended. Some brought photographs, others brought memories. Tom stood before them, unsure at first. Then he began to speak without shaking. He shared lessons learned in the sky. Not about heroism but responsibility and care. As Tom spoke, the crowd grew still. His words carried weight without anger. He did not blame anyone or demand apology. He simply explained choices made under pressure. How lives mattered more than recognition. How silence once felt easier than fighting lies. Many listeners lowered their heads in reflection. Understanding replaced the need for judgment. The plane stood behind him during the gathering. Its restored frame reflected the setting light. What once looked weak now looked dignified. Children touched the wings with wonder. Parents watched with quiet emotion. The aircraft had become more than metal. It was now a teacher without a voice, sharing its story through presence alone. After the gathering, officials returned quietly. This time with records and formal acknowledgement. Mistakes were admitted without excuses. Tom listened calmly without bitterness. Mara stood beside him as support, not shield. They offered restoration of his name and record. Tom accepted not for pride but closure. A chapter-long open finally began to close. Work on the plane entered its final stage. Every part inspected with care and patience. Tom guided each check from memory and instinct. Mara followed with trust and precision. The engine sound returned steady and strong. The airfield held its breath during the test. When it passed, people smiled softly. Hope rose without needing words. Tom spent a quiet evening alone near the plane. He placed his hand on the frame once more. This time without weight or regret. Memories still existed but no longer ruled him. He understood that silence had protected him once. But speaking had finally freed him. The sky above felt open again. Not as a challenge but as a welcome. Mara joined him as the light faded. They stood side by side watching the horizon. Neither spoke yet understanding filled the space. This was never about proving others wrong. It was about honoring truth and quiet courage. The plane was ready for its final purpose. Not to escape the past but to face it. And the moment everyone waited for drew near. The final morning arrived with soft light spreading across the airfield. The sky was clear and calm as if waiting patiently. People gathered quietly, standing farther back than before. There was no laughter, no careless talk. Only anticipation and respect filled the air. The plane rested at the center, steady and complete. Mara stood near it, calm but deeply focused. Tom remained beside her, breathing slowly. The engine was checked one last time with careful hands. Every sound mattered, every movement was deliberate. Tom walked around the plane, touching each section gently. His face carried calm, not fear. Years of silence no longer weighed on his shoulders. This moment was not about the past. It was about returning something to the sky. And returning himself to the world. Mara stepped back, giving Tom space. She watched him climb into the seat with steady steps. The same seat he once left behind quietly. People held their breath as the engine started. The sound was smooth, strong, and alive. It echoed across the field with confidence. Tom closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. Ready not to escape, but to rise. As the plane moved forward, the crowd stayed silent. No one reached for phones or spoke. Wheels rolled across the ground with growing speed. The wind wrapped around the wings once more. Then slowly the plane lifted from the earth. Gasps followed, mixed with quiet emotion. The aircraft climbed steady and sure. Proof written clearly against the sky. Mara watched with hands clasped tightly. Tears filled her eyes without shame. Not from fear but from meaning fulfilled. The plane circled above the airfield smoothly. Sunlight reflected off its restored frame. Every doubt once spoken now felt small. Truth moved freely through the open sky, carried by wings once mocked. Tom guided the plane with calm focus. The sky felt familiar, welcoming, and wide. No storm, no pressure, only peace. He realized he no longer needed silence. The truth had already spoken for him. He flew one final circle, then turned back. The landing was smooth, confident, and controlled. Applause broke the silence at last. When the plane stopped, people stepped forward slowly. Some clapped, others simply watched in awe. Tom stepped down, meeting open faces. There were no demands, no questions. Only gratitude and quiet respect. Mara reached him, smiling through tears. They shared a simple look of understanding. Nothing more needed to be said. Later that day the airfield grew quiet again. But it was no longer forgotten. A small sign stood near the hangar, sharing the story in simple words. Children asked questions and listened closely. The plane remained not as scrap but as memory. A lesson in courage, responsibility, and truth. Carried forward without noise. As evening arrived, Mara and Tom stood together, watching the sky change colors slowly. The journey had reached its end naturally. No victory speeches, no anger remained. Only peace earned through honesty and patience. The plane had silenced doubt without shouting. And Tom had reclaimed his place without force. The sky held their story gently forever.